WFYI podcast brought to you by Bloomington, Indiana, an American college town offering food and drink, college sports, outdoor activities, live music, cool art, and good times daily. Everyone is welcome in Bloomington. More information at visitbloomington.com.
This is WFYI News Now. It's May 2nd, and I'm Abriana Herron. On today's show, a state official says he's investing more state dollars in Israeli bonds. An update on the protests at IU and how the university is preparing for commencement ceremonies. A speed camera program coming to some highway work zones. And advocates and county officials are urging people to vote in the primary election on May 7th.
And your vote does matter. I know last year in some of the elections, some of those votes, it came down to one vote.
Those stories coming up. But first, the original farmers market kicked off Wednesday on Monument Circle, moving to the location because of renovations at the city market. Iris Dillon from the Department of Metropolitan Development says the new location makes sense.
We get more vendors, they have more space, they just feel this sense of community, but the atmosphere that it offers is important.
Monument Circle has long been a space that occasionally closes to vehicle traffic for events. And there have been ongoing discussion about permanently closing the circle to traffic. Spark on the Circle, an arts and activity program, will return and close the northwest corner of Monument Circle starting June 1st. Dillon says these kinds of pedestrian placemaking efforts are key.
It's very vital. It's very vital to the energy. Downtown is coming back, slowly, but it also brings our neighbors. It also brings our residents.
The open air market offers local produce, meats, cheeses, and baked goods, as well as meal options from local vendors. It runs every Wednesday until October 2nd. Indiana State Treasurer Daniel Elliott announced Wednesday he's investing more state dollars in Israeli bonds. The new $5 million investment follows a $35 million purchase Elliott made last November. That brings the state's total investment in the state of Israel up to $110 million. Critics of the move last year said it amounted to support of the genocide of Palestinians. Those cries have only grown louder in recent months, in protests on college campuses across the country in recent days, including notably at Indiana University, have called on universities to divest from Israel. In a statement, Elliott indicates the latest bond purchase is a reaction to that. He says he wants to, quote, refocus and recommit to our most important ally. And an update on those protests at IU, the university says it anticipates ongoing protests could occur at commencement ceremonies this weekend. Protesters set up a Gaza Solidarity encampment last Thursday. They want IU to divest from Israel and the U.S. military. State and IU police over the weekend arrested 23 protesters and have since come under scrutiny over claims of using excessive force. A university email to graduates and their families this week said any protesters at commencement ceremonies will have a designated area outside of venues. An IU Police Department spokeswoman says protesters are also free to use public spaces, such as sidewalks. She said police will first redirect violators to the designated zones, and that failure to comply could result in different penalties on a case-by-case basis. The Indiana State Police confirmed it will assist with security. Spokesperson Kevin Getz declined to share details on what that will look like. Speed cameras in a few highway work zones around Indiana are expected to arrive in late summer or early fall. Indiana Public Broadcasting's Brandon Smith reports on the progress of the program created by state lawmakers in 2023.
The Indiana Department of Transportation says implementation in other states with similar programs typically took between 12 and 18 months. INDOT says it's working through that process now, which includes hiring personnel to administer it, contracting with an outside vendor, and selecting sites where the cameras will be deployed. The legislation only allows cameras at 4 work zones across the state. Indiana says it will consider crash data, average speeds, and traffic volume when choosing the sites. Under the law, police could issue speeding tickets to those captured on camera going at least 11 miles per hour over the limit when workers are present. The first offense would come with a warning, the second would be a $75 fine, and it would be $150 for every ticket after that. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Brandon Smith at the State House.
And for our final story today, advocates are encouraging Hoosiers to vote ahead of the May 7th primary election. As Indiana Public Broadcasting's Violet Cumber-Weiland reports, one county clerk emphasized how important individual votes are.
Destry Ritchie is the Cass County clerk. She says more Indiana voters tend to show up for general elections. However, she says votes in the primary elections still hold a lot of weight.
And your vote does matter. I know last year in some of the elections, some of those votes, it came down to one vote.
She adds voting is a right and a privilege and is something Hoosiers should use. Ritchie says voters should also update their addresses within 30 days of moving to a new address, even if it is within the same city. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Violet Cumber-Weiland.
That's all for today's episode of WFYI News Now. Our podcast is produced by the following people who live in your community: Drew Daudelin, Kendall Antron, who composed the music for this podcast, and me, Abriana Herron. Our news director is Sarah Neal-Estes. If you like today's episode, remember to subscribe and share. And follow WFYI on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube to check in on our newsroom throughout the day. Thanks for listening. We'll be back tomorrow.